Hi, I am very fair. You may know me by my old username, Pud104. I am the creator and editor of SUBPAR Mario 64, the primary machinima series premiering on the Teen Toad YouTube channel. So to give a little background, SUBPAR as a series has existed since around 2013 when I first started making machinima. Granted, at the time the story was wildly different and didn't resemble its current state in the slightest, give or take a few characters here and there. It also wasn't even initially titled SUBPAR Mario 64. That's something that only happened in like 2016. Why am I telling you this at all? Well, it's all to say that things change, plans evolve, priorities shift, and while I've had a general outline for the story of Subpar over the years, things are changing all the time. New character ideas, new character models to adapt into original characters, new plot threads spawning out of the depths of my brain. This isn't like some sort of studio mandated production where things have to be set in stone for the sake of a set release date. It's just a fun passion project that I try to work on in my free time as best I can. And so while I hate to brew excitement for videos that are realistically pretty far down the pipeline, I do feel like sharing what the current slate for future Subpar videos will look like. Keep in mind, this is all heavily subject to change, as even like the next planned video is an idea that only spawned a few weeks ago. But with that said, let's begin. So Subpar is structured sort of like a novel. The main chunk of the story is told in the chapter episodes, while smaller stories are told in interludes. Huge story events go down in the main chapter episodes, and smaller events that still have ramifications for the main story go down in the interludes. Currently, Subpar has 3 entries released. Every entry released thus far, as well as every entry announced in this video, are part of the first major story arc of Subpar, the Housewarming arc. And I know, like, you hear story arc, you're like, SMG4's arcs are fucking stupid. Listen, stories are told in arcs. His stories are more comedic, it's not entirely story-based, whereas something that is entirely story-based has every reason to be organized as arcs. So the first main chapter, Day of the Lease, released on November 21st, 2019. Day of the Lease serves as the introduction to the world of Subpar, introducing the audience to the main cast, where they're all located, what roles they fill, and so on. The current version of Day of the Lease initially began production in 2017, succeeding a former scrapped version that began in either late 2015 or early 2016. The current public release of Day of the Lease was actually intended to be a bigger video titled Chapter 1, The Break-In, and in theory, this video would have been 30 plus minutes long and would have started the story with a pretty huge bang right off the get-go. But I opted to take things a lot slower, so now the events of Day of the Lease have been split off from the original plan for the break-in and are what you see today. Prologue, Day of the Lease. If you stick through the credits of the prologue, there's even a tease of the break-in as its own standalone video, which obviously that plan also ended up changing. That's another indication of priorities shifting all the time. While Day of the Lease remains an integral part of the continuity, I feel as though my capability as both a writer and a video editor have heavily changed since it initially began production in 2017. The video feels a bit dated at times, at least to me, and so I hope to correct some of its shortcomings in future installments. Obviously, the ink is dry at this point, so any story changes I could have hoped to make are a lost cause. So all I can do now is hope to elaborate or expand on concepts I feel as though weren't communicated very well in the prologue. That being said, I feel as though Day of the Lease was an important point in my life. Its reception was like an indication to me that I had not been putting in the effort for nothing. It felt like a big green light was turned on right in front of me, as though to say, this is something that people are interested and invested in, and it gave me a reason to keep going. The next Subpar video was one titled, Where Were We? This is the first interlude in Subpar's continuity, serving as an introduction to the narrator as a character of his own. He's a celestial whittle named Beckett, reading a story to a small audience of other celestial beings representing different species on planet Earth, primarily in the Mushroom Kingdom. Where Were We is a really meta video, acting as an excuse for why Subpar videos take so long to come out. It's entirely about Beckett's audience being upset that Beckett hasn't finished telling the story, to which he begrudgingly agrees to continue doing so. In the future, Beckett and his audience will appear in the beginning of main chapter episodes to see how the audience reacts to the events of the main story. While Where Were We is not entirely integral to the main plot, the introduction of Beckett is something I feel didn't need to be saved for later, so I ripped the band-aid off early and made a quick short about him. The next and latest Subpar episode is Chapter 1, The New Place. This is the longest Subpar episode by a country mile, and it primarily serves as an introduction to a whole slew of side characters and different conflicts. The new residents of the house, Puddin and Swan, are introduced to their new neighbors, Lasden, Spot, Captain Mac, and Two-Tone, whilst also being informed of what appears to be some past traumatic history between Lasden and the estate's guardian Dim, who we met in Day of the Lease. In the future, the relationship between Puddin and Swan, the new guys seeking to start a fun new life, and Dim, their closest neighbor and somebody who seems to want nothing to do with just about anybody, will be expanded greatly as they learn more about Flora and its history. That's the main setup for the Floran side of the Subpar story. Meanwhile, Blue Toad, who is just 1 week into his new job as one of the princess's advisors, visits her castle in hopes of getting to know some of his coworkers and befriending them. However, he's met with a lot of backtalk, a lot of disrespect, and a whole lot of being told what to do, even though he's visiting this place on his off day. This initiates a conversation between him and Toadsworth, who says that the fear of danger in the kingdom has made everyone completely stone cold to one another, So since Blue is the first new Toad hired since they last saw Bowser, he is the biggest force for change in the castle. He is a blank slate, and he has every reason to make the castle a better place to work in. This is the current setup for the royal side of the Subpar story. So while Day of the Lease acts as an introduction to the characters and the state of the world they all live in, the new place acts as an introduction to some of the character conflicts that will be affected by events going forward. Now for the episodes that haven't been released just yet. The first video released after the new place will be an interlude titled Test Flight Number 1. Test Flight Number 1 is a small story featuring Blue Toad tinkering with Clowny, the clown car that he was entrusted with by Toadsworth during Chapter 1. This video is scripted in its entirety and has begun production as of this week. I'm not certain when it's going to be finished, but it definitely won't be another 3 years between the new place and this one. So next few interludes exist to contribute towards the story of Puddin' and Swan settling into their new life in Flora County. Lalene's Day In is another small story introducing the viewers to Lalene, a character mentioned in the post-credit scene of Chapter 1 as she goes about her daily routine, only to be interrupted by a few intruders at her house. Lalene's Day In was initially intended to be the first video release after Chapter 1, but I still have to make a bunch of assets before I can actually begin that video. So Test Flight Number 1 will be released first because all the assets for that video are already done, and the ones that I do have to make for that video are very small in comparison to making a whole house for Lalene and so on and so forth. The video following Lalene's Day In is an interlude titled Handle with Care. It's a story of Dr. Swan visiting the local Florin post office to receive a package he had shipped from his and Puddin's former house, but some small shenanigans ensue within the post office and it completely delays Swan and it ruins his day. And it's a very fun story. I think it's pretty funny. The video immediately following Handle with Care is another interlude titled Queen Mattress. It's a ridiculous story. It's chronicling a game of dibs played between Puddin and Swan. Every night they try to settle who gets to sleep in the one bed in the house. So, one is either stuck sleeping on the couch, one is stuck sleeping in the bed, or vice versa. The next main chapter episode is Chapter 2, As Seen on TV. As Seen on TV is an introduction to the new and improved Toad Town, which is mentioned to be undergoing reconstruction in the new place. I hope this gives some sense of the fact that I definitely do have a large plot outline in mind, and so main chapter episodes will tease upcoming events in such a manner. Interludes will also elaborate on smaller ideas presented within chapters, so things like, Puddin' and Swan settling their bed situation, their packages from their old house, meeting Lalene, meeting all their new ridiculous friends. As Seen on TV is also the proper introduction to Clary T, a character mentioned in passing in Day of the Lease as he presents the current state of Toad Town to a live audience. Since Chapter 2 is definitely going to take some time to even reach, there's going to probably be some interludes between Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. I just haven't reached that point quite yet. All of them will still fall under the Housewarming arc if they do happen, but as of right now, there's no plans for any interludes. It's just an idea. Chapter 3 is titled The Break-In. It's the video the Day of the Lease was initially intended to be bundled with, so that gives some idea of what the initial plan was and why I opted to take things significantly slower and build up the world a bit more before delving deep into the plot. The Break-In will be split into 3 parts. Part 1, whose title I won't spoil quite yet. Part 2, Epicenter Redux, and Part 3, Emboldened. If the name Epicenter sounds familiar, it's because Epicenter was initially the first Subpar interlude ever released. It was a quick 2 months right after Day of the Lease dropped. However, Epicenter to me was a complete mess. It was created out of excitement to share the story that was yet to be told. I hope to create some sort of connective tissue between the shorter videos and the larger chapter videos, just in anticipation of telling the story, but Epicenter wound up being a rushed and extremely undercooked video that did not make any sense in any given context from what had been explained in Day of the Lease. It would have only made sense had Chapter 1, The Break-In, become a reality, and so now the plot of the original Epicenter has been folded into the current plan for Chapter 3, The Break-In, in its current state. The Break-In, with all of its parts, now acts as the inciting incident for the rest of the Housewarming arc, setting up extremely important plot events for the rest of the arc to follow. Following the 3 parts of The Break-In is the conclusion of the Housewarming arc, Chapter 4, Attack from Within and Without. I won't share any immediate story details, but my hope is that it wraps up all the character stories established within the arc very nicely, while also serving as setup for the rest of Subpar as a whole. That's all I've really got planned out thoroughly enough at the moment. While Subpar itself has a very definitive start and end planned, a lot of the details in between are still missing or muddy. The Housewarming arc itself is plotted out in its entirety across the main chapter videos and the currently planned interludes. Interludes are definitely a little looser in how they're released, so I may end up creating more interludes to elaborate on things introduced in the main chapter videos, but the main chapter videos are set in stone. Those won't change. Interludes probably will. That's all I really got to share today. I'm definitely looking forward to releasing more Subpar in the future amidst my current studies. I hope I can begin to release them in a more timely manner as I refine its style and my own writing and editing workflow, but obviously no promises. I'm definitely making an effort to get help where I can, but I'm also doing my best to not leech too much help from others. I currently have the Subpar story crew who have been a really big help in ironing out details and helping me make sure things in the plot make sense while also tempering my ridiculous ambitions, as well as Ankal and Mr. Game & Sketch helping out with character designs and new models to be created all the time. All that said, I'm just human, and I can only work as fast as my brain lets me. This isn't a full-time job or anything, as much as I wish it was. So I'm working as best as I can given personal circumstances. So yeah. But thanks for tuning in. Tomorrow's a new day. See you whenever.